Why was she always 5 minutes early? Maybe it was habit. Or maybe it was survival. Sarah sat in her usual spot by the window, hands resting lightly on her knees, eyes calm but scanning, always scanning. The Riverside Community Center's veteran support group was the same as it had been every Tuesday night. 12 mismatched chairs in a circle, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the quiet hum of a vending machine in the corner. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. 8 months she'd been coming here. 8 months of quiet listening, of nodding when others spoke, of speaking herself only when it mattered. And when she did speak, people leaned forward. She had that effect. Not loud, not dramatic. Just precise. Tonight was different. Marcus Webb was holding court again. Former Army sergeant. Barrel-chested, with a gut he now wore like a badge. His voice boomed. His hands painted pictures in the air. Afghanistan stories that grew taller every week. The laughter from a few in the group told Sarah they didn't mind the exaggerations. But Sarah's jaw tightened when Marcus claimed he'd single-handedly taken out a Taliban stronghold. "That's not how it works," she said quietly. The room shifted. A few eyes turned toward her. Marcus' smirk deepened. "What's that, sweetheart?" "You don't just storm a compound alone," Sarah continued. "There are protocols, backup, extraction plans. Real combat isn't a video game." The words landed like a knife between them. Marcus leaned back in his chair, grinning like he'd been waiting for this moment. "And what would you know about it? You fix cars for a living." Silence. Heavy, unblinking. Everyone here knew Sarah worked at Jimmy's Auto down on 5th. The grease under her fingernails, the coveralls that made her blend in. She was unremarkable in all the ways people like Marcus measured worth. Small frame, shoulder length, brown hair tied back in a ponytail. The kind of woman people overlooked. Sarah held his stare. "I know because I was there. Syria, 2019. That got their attention." She leaned back, her voice steady but her hands beginning to tremble in her lap. "Our unit was tasked with infiltrating a high-value target compound outside Raqqa. Intel suggested they were holding American hostages. The others exchanged glances. Sarah never talked about her service, just vague references to deployments, usually followed by a change of subject. Now, she spoke with the clipped, clinical rhythm of a mission briefing. "We went in at 03:30 ORs. 4-person team. The intel was wrong. It was a trap. They were waiting for us." Her eyes shifted, as if seeing something far away beyond them. Cracked ceiling tiles. The first IED took out Combs. The second. She touched her collarbone unconsciously, fingers brushing over 3 faint, parallel scars that vanished under her shirt. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "Right. And? I suppose you were Special Forces, Navy SEAL, maybe?" "Come on. Women can't even pass SEAL training, let alone—" "Actually," Sarah interrupted, her voice calm but edged with steel. "I was a SEAL. Team 6, Specialized Maritime Operations. Call sign Phantom." Laughter rippled through half the circle. Others shifted in their chairs, unsure. Marcus was already pulling out his phone. "I'm calling this in. Stolen valor is a federal crime, lady. And I'm not sitting here letting some wannabe mechanic disrespect real warriors." Sarah stayed perfectly still, her breathing even. She'd been in far worse situations. "You want to know what real combat looks like, Marcus?" she said softly. "It's not glorious. It's holding your teammate while they bleed out in your arms. Zip tied to a chair, listening to them scream your real name until they break and give the enemy everything they want." The words hit the room like a detonation. Marcus froze mid-stride. It's spending 4 months in a cell too small to stand in, eating rice and cockroaches while they try to break you, waterboarding, electric shocks. And when you finally escape, it's killing 3 guards with a piece of broken concrete. Then walking 47 miles through hostile territory with a dislocated shoulder and internal bleeding. Her tone never changed. She could have been reading a grocery list. But her hands now shook so badly she locked them together in her lap. It's coming home to a country that erased every record of your service, gave you a new name, told you to forget it ever happened, because it was too classified for the history books. It's working under the hood of a car because that's the only job they could give you without a background check exposing an operation that officially never happened. The room was silent. That's when the doors burst open. Uniforms flooded in. Marcus stepped back, suddenly unsure. But it was too late. As the police car pulled away, Sarah caught her reflection in the window. She looked exactly like she was supposed to. 34. Mechanic. Forgettable. Someone who wasn't dangerous. Someone who definitely wasn't one of the deadliest operatives the Navy had ever trained. But the scars on her collarbone told a different story. And somewhere, in a file, stamped classified, Admiral Rebecca Torres was about to get a phone call that would change everything. Detective Ray Coleman slammed the case file shut. The sound cracked through the empty bullpen like a gunshot. It was 2:47 a.m. 3 days. He'd been working her for 3 days. Most stolen Valor cases were simple. They crumble fast. The frauds got their ranks wrong, mixed up dates, couldn't remember the basics. By hour 6, they were begging for a lawyer. Sarah Martinez wasn't like the others. Coleman rubbed his eyes, staring at the 2 sides of a puzzle that refused to fit. On one side, a woman with no military record, no discharge papers, no VA benefits, no trace in any database. On the other, a woman who knew things she shouldn't. The first red flag had been during hour 2 of interrogation. He tried the standard trick throw and fake jargon to see if she'd bite. So, he said casually, "Tell me about your experience with tactical soup sandwiches in the field." She'd given him a look that could strip paint. "Detective, there's no such thing as a tactical soup sandwich. That's not military jargon. It's a bad joke from a bad movie. A soup sandwich just means something's completely messed up. But no one puts tactical in front of it. Are you actually testing me? Or do you just not know what you're talking about?" Strike 1. By hour 4, he'd brought in Backup Sergeant Major Patricia Hayes from the local recruiting office. 18 years in the Army. Combat veteran. Hard as nails. If anyone could spot a fraud, it was Hayes. For 30 minutes, Hayes grilled Sarah on everything. Boot camp protocols, chain of command, advanced tactics. Sarah answered each question with the kind of casual precision you couldn't fake. Describe. The sound of incoming mortar fire? Hayes demanded. Sarah didn't hesitate. Depends on distance and trajectory. Close impacts, freight train mixed with thunder. Distant ones, high-pitched whistle before the boom. The really dangerous ones? No whistle at all. They just arrive. Hayes went pale. Pulled Coleman aside. Her voice was low, tight. "Ray, I've served 3 tours in Afghanistan. That woman just described incoming fire better than half my combat vets. Either she's the most committed liar in history, or she's telling the truth. That, or haunted him. By day 2, Coleman wasn't sleeping. Her knowledge wasn't just accurate, it was surgical. She mentioned weapon systems no one should know about. Described tactics that weren't in any manual. Talked about missions that didn't exist. So he pressed her. "Tell me about your training." "Which part?" she asked. "Basic underwater. Demolition? Advanced marksmanship? SEER? Or do you mean the programs that don't have names?" "What programs?" She studied him for a beat. "If I told you, you'd either think I was insane, or you'd have to kill me to protect national security. Neither option sounds great. The breakthrough came when Coleman brought in Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a PTSD specialist. Walsh was there to evaluate her, decide if Sarah was delusional or just lying. An hour later, Walsh came out looking like she'd seen a ghost. "That woman's trauma is real," Walsh said. "The way she talks about captivity, the details of the torture, you can't fake that. Not like this. But there's no record of her service." "Then maybe the records are wrong," Coleman offered. Walsh shook her head. "Or maybe they don't exist for a reason." That night, Coleman made calls he shouldn't have. Old contacts in federal agencies. He asked vague questions about classified units. Most hung up. Some told him to forget it. One, a former FBI agent, now buried deep in some nameless agency, was dead silent before saying, "Coleman, you're stepping into waters over your head. File the paperwork and walk away." But he couldn't walk away, because on day 3, she gave him something. Something no fraud would give. "You want proof?" Sarah asked. She rolled up her sleeve. Her forearm was a map of scars. "These aren't random. They're coordinates. Carved into my arm with glass during month 3 of captivity." She pointed to each set. "Here's the compound where they held me. Here's the mass grave. Here's the weapons cache they were going to use next." Coleman leaned in. The scars weren't sloppy. They were precise, permanent. "I memorized everything, Detective. Every face, every voice. Because I knew someday someone would need it. The question is, are you brave enough to check?" Coleman stared at her for a long time. If she was lying, she was committed beyond belief. If she was telling the truth, then someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to erase her existence. His decision was instant. He picked up the phone. The number he dialed didn't appear in any public directory. It would ring in a secure office inside a building the government. Pretend it didn't exist. And in that office, Admiral Rebecca Torres was about to hear a name she hadn't heard in 5 years. One she'd been told was buried forever. Admiral Rebecca Torres hadn't set foot in a civilian police station in 15 years, but the call had come through encrypted channels, and the name had made her blood turn to ice. Sarah Martinez. She'd been in her Pentagon office, reviewing budget reports that could put a coffee addict to sleep when the agent delivered the news. The words hit like a sledgehammer. A woman in rural Pennsylvania had been arrested for stolen valor, claiming she was a former Navy SEAL. Team 6. The detective was asking about classified operations. Torres dropped her coffee mug. The black liquid bled across her desk, soaking into documents stamped top secret. "What's her name?" she asked, already knowing. "Sarah Martinez, ma'am. 34. Mechanic." Torres didn't remember standing. She just knew she was moving. Her voice already cold and clipped. "I'll be there in 2 hours." The drive from D.C. to the small Pennsylvania town was a blur. She didn't want to think. Thinking meant remembering. And remembering meant facing the truth. Sarah Martinez was a ghost. Officially dead. KIA in a mission so classified that even Torres had to fight for access to the after-action file. Buried deep. Sealed. Forgotten. A ghost Torres herself had buried. The Riverside Police Department smelled of old coffee and worn linoleum. Torres moved through it like she owned it. Dress blues. Rows of ribbons that told a story the public would never know. Every cop she passed straightened without realizing it. Detective Ray Coleman met her at the front desk. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Intelligent eyes, stubborn jaw. The kind of man who didn't like being told to back off. "Admiral Torres," he said, extending a hand. "Detective, you're about to step into waters so deep they don't appear on any map," she cut in. "Where is she?" Coleman hesitated. "She's been here 3 days. Won't break, won't change her story. Claims she was part of some classified unit. Says her records were erased. I've never seen anything like it. Either she's the most dedicated fraud in history, or she's telling the truth." Torres finished. Coleman frowned. "You know her?" Torres didn't answer. Instead, she followed him down a narrow corridor, her mind replaying a memory she wished she could erase. 12 women in a windowless briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command. 12 volunteers for the most dangerous mission in SEAL history. And one of them, a small, quiet sniper with eyes that saw everything, had been call-signed Phantom. Sarah Martinez. They reached Interrogation Room 3. Behind one-way glass, a small woman sat at the table, perfectly still. Civilian clothes, hair tied back, ordinary, except for her posture. That posture was unmistakable. Torres felt the weight of 5 years crash down on her chest. She'd told herself they were all gone, all 12. Killed in action during operation. Nightfall. She told Sarah's mother the same thing. Handed her the folded flag. Kept her voice steady while she lied. "I need to see her alone," Torres said. Coleman hesitated. "Ma'am, this is an active investigation." "Detective," Torres said, locking eyes with him. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. That woman isn't just a veteran. She's a weapon, a piece of military hardware in human form. And if she is who I think she is, we have a problem that goes far beyond stolen valor." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that starts wars." Torres didn't wait for an answer. She stepped into the room. Sarah looked up. Time stopped. Admiral Torres. Her voice cracked, like an old radio signal finally cutting through the static. "They told me you were dead. The whole unit. They said everyone was KIA." Torres sat slowly, studying her. On the surface, Sarah looked like any other mechanic who spent her days under the hood of a car. But Torres knew better. "Show me your left shoulder blade," Torres said quietly. Sarah hesitated. "There are people watching. Show me." Slowly. Sarah turned, lifting her shirt. There, beneath a later edition of a colorful butterfly tattoo, was a small black anchor crossed with a trident. And beneath it, the number 77, Unit 77, the program that never officially existed. The one so secret that even whispering its name was an act of treason. Torres's breath caught. Jesus Christ. "You're really alive." Sarah turned back, tears cutting lines down her face. "I've been trying to tell them for 3 days. I've been trying to tell someone for 5 years. But nobody believes me, because I don't exist anymore." "Do I?" "You made sure of that." The words were a knife. And Torres didn't flinch because she knew they were true. She had been the one who signed the order. The one who decided the truth about Operation Nightfall could never be known. "Sarah," Torres said softly, "you have to understand. Understand." "What?" Sarah's voice sharpened. "That you left me to die? That you told my mother I was dead while I was chained to a wall in Syria? That you gave me a fake name and told me to forget everything I bled for?" Through the glass, Coleman was watching intently, recording. This conversation wasn't cleanup anymore. It was confession. The mission was compromised, Torres began. "Compromised?" Sarah snapped. "We walked into a trap because someone in your chain of command sold us out. And instead of finding the traitor, you erased us." The silence between them felt like a loaded weapon. "You want to know what really happened in Syria?" Sarah leaned forward. Her voice dropped, dangerous. "You want to know what your larger considerations cost?" Torres swallowed. "Yes." "Then, buckle up," Sarah whispered. "Because you're about to learn why some secrets are too dangerous to keep." The door clicked shut behind Torres. One word from her out, and Detective Coleman was gone, left in the hallway with more questions than answers. Inside, Torres locked the door. Then she pulled a small black device from her pocket, flicked it on, and set it on the table between them. A faint hum filled the air, enough to scramble every camera and microphone in the room. No recordings. No paper trail. No witnesses. Sarah's eyes followed the device. Then they came back to Torres. 5 years of rage lived there. And pain. So much pain. They told me you were dead, Sarah said again, softer this time. The whole unit. They said everyone was KIA when they pulled me out. Torres studied her. The Sarah she remembered had been the team's comm center, a sniper who could put a round through a keyhole from 800 yards. A linguist fluent in 4 Middle Eastern dialects. A quiet force in a room full of adrenaline and bravado. Now, she was older. War, but the steel was still there. Sarah. Phantom, Torres said carefully. We had to let the world believe. You were gone. All of you. Sarah's jaw tightened. Worse than letting me think my team was dead. Worse than giving me a fake identity and telling me to forget everything I bled for. Torres' voice was heavy with years of guilt. The alternative was worse. Sarah leaned forward, eyes hard. Worse than watching my friends dragged away in zip ties while I was chained to a wall? Worse than grieving people who were alive? The Admiral hesitated. Then she reached into her briefcase, tapped out a code on a secure tablet. The screen came alive with a wall of classified files. Your team isn't dead, Torres said quietly. Sarah froze. They're alive, all of them. Different names. Different lives, each one believing they were the only survivor. She slid the tablet across the table. Sarah's breath caught as images flashed before her. Rodriguez working as a nurse in Seattle. Chun teaching martial arts in Denver. Williams running a small bookstore in Maine. Her throat tightened. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that to us? Torres looked her in the eye. Because Operation Nightfall wasn't just a mission. It was a test, a proof of concept for a new kind of warfare. 12 women, deep cover, capable of infiltrating in ways male operatives couldn't. You weren't just SEALs. You were the future. Sarah's eyes didn't leave hers. And the trap? Torres exhaled slowly. We had a source inside the organization, someone feeding us intel for months. The mission looked solid. Get in, identify leadership, eliminate the threat. Clean, surgical. But our source was a double. Agent from day one. The compound, the guards, everything you saw, it was bait. Sarah nodded faintly, as if she'd always known. We walked into it. You walked into the most sophisticated ambush in modern warfare, Torres said. They'd studied our tactics, learned our procedures. They knew exactly how you'd approach, exactly how you'd react. They'd been planning it for over a year. Sarah's gaze drifted, remembering. First blast took comms. Second collapsed part of the building. We were split before we knew what happened. I saw Rodriguez 20 feet away. They had her zip-tied and hooded before I could even raise my rifle. They wanted you alive. Torres said they wanted to study you, to learn how American female operatives were trained. You represented something they'd never faced before, women who could fight like men, and turn their own cultural assumptions against them. Sarah's mouth was tight. I held out 6 hours in the rubble before they got me. Killed 11 before they dropped me with a dart. Torres let that sit. She knew the rest, but hearing it from Sarah was different. 4 months, Sarah said, her voice low. 4 months of hell, and you left us there. We tried, Torres said, and for the first time, her voice broke. Every extraction plan failed. Every diplomatic channel ended. The enemy didn't want ransom. They didn't want trades. They wanted to break you. To prove American women couldn't endure what men could. Sarah's eyes were far away. They made us watch. Every time someone broke, the rest of us had to see it, hear it. They wanted us to lose faith in each other, in the flag, in ourselves. But you didn't, Torres said. Sarah gave a small, bitter laugh. You think that's a victory? Torres shook her head. I think it's why. You're still here. She leaned back, voice quieter now. Tell me about the escape. Sarah hesitated. Her hands moved almost unconsciously, fingers tracing an invisible outline on the table. I worked at a piece of concrete in my cell wall. Weeks. Just a few minutes at a time. When the moment came, I killed 3 guards with it. Fought my way out. Her eyes locked on Torres. 47 miles. Dislocated shoulder. Internal bleeding. I followed the North Star. Hid in daylight. Moved at night. 3 days later, I found friendly lines. Torres' voice was almost reverent. You saved yourself. And in doing so, you saved the program. Sarah's brow furrowed. What do you mean? That route you took led us straight to the compound. We pulled your team out within 72 hours. Captured the network. Caught the double agent. Sarah's lips parted. They were really alive, Torres nodded slowly. Alive. Physically, but broken. That's why we erased you all. The mission was too classified to acknowledge. The trauma too severe to ignore. We gave you new lives. Clean slates. A chance to heal without carrying the weight of state secrets. Sarah shook her head. We weren't healing. We were dying. Alone. Torres' eyes dropped. I know. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting the program. Protecting national security. But I was protecting my career. Silence. Heavy. Sarah leaned forward. So what happens now? Torres met her gaze. Now, we fix this. All of it. I'll reunite your team. Give you your real names back. And Unit 77. It's coming back. With oversight this time, with support. The Pentagon finally understands. The future isn't just bigger guns. It's people who think differently. See differently. Sarah's eyes were wet, but the steel was back. And the people who sold us out? Torres' mouth curved into a cold, thin smile. Justice has a long memory. And an even longer reach. By morning, the case against Sarah Martinez was gone. On paper, it looked clean. Dismissed for lack of evidence. No fanfare. No headlines. Just another name shuffled into the stack of forgotten police reports. But Detective Coleman knew better. He'd been there when Torres walked into his station like she owned it. He'd heard enough of their muffled conversation through the glass to know he'd stumbled into something far bigger than stolen Valor. And when Torres left that night, her eyes carried the weight of a decision that could rewrite history. Hours later, an accident claimed Sarah Martinez. At least, that's what the official report said. A collision on Route 15. Quick death. Tragic. End of story. But the woman who stepped out of the police station that morning was no ghost. She had a new name, a new identity. And this time, she wasn't being buried. She was being set loose. Torres was waiting in a black SUV at the curb. No uniforms. No salutes. Just a door held open. Sarah slid inside without a word. The drive out of town was quiet. Rain tapped against the windows. The hum of the tires filled the space between them. Finally, Torres spoke. You'll have everything you need. Documents, accounts, a secure phone. You'll be able to move freely, but you'll answer only to me. Understood? Sarah kept her eyes on the wet blur of the road ahead. And my team? Torres' hands tightened on the wheel. They're coming home. One at a time, quietly. We can't draw attention yet. Sarah turned her head. And after they're all back? Torres glanced at her. After that, we rebuild Unit 77. And this time, it won't be buried. The facility was outside Washington, hidden behind layers of fences, cameras, and things far less visible but far more dangerous. Inside, a large steel-framed room waited. 12 chairs in a circle. Sarah stood at the doorway for a long moment, looking at them. Memories hit like rifle shots. The first briefing. The jokes that broke tension before a mission. The unspoken trust that came with knowing the person next to you would take a bullet without hesitation. You'll see them here, Torres said quietly. The first to arrive was Rodriguez. She stopped in the doorway when she saw Sarah, her face going pale, eyes wide. For a moment, neither moved. Then Rodriguez crossed the distance in 3 long strides and pulled Sarah into a bone-deep embrace. No words. Just a choked breath that sounded like a sob. One by one, they came. Chun, Williams, Vargas. Every arrival was the same. Disbelief. Then tears. Then the crushing relief of holding someone you thought was gone forever. By the time all 12 were there, the air in the room was thick with grief and joy braided together. They talked. They raged. They laughed in bursts that ended in tears. And when the anger came, the real, sharp kind, it wasn't at each other. It was for the betrayal, for the years stolen, for the silence forced on them. Torres stood back, watching them. For the first time in 5 years, the unit she'd erased was whole again. When the storm of voices eased, Sarah rose to her feet. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "We survived hell once," she said. "We'll do it again. But this time, it'll be on our terms. And the people who put us there," she glanced at Torres, "they'll know we're not done." Torres met her eyes. "Justice will come. But first, we train." The ghosts were home now. And ghosts don't rest. The training didn't start with weapons. It started with trust. 5 years of living as ghosts had left scars deeper than the ones on their bodies. They'd learned to hide, to keep their heads down, to never trust anyone outside the small, invisible circle of self-preservation. Now, Torres was asking them to step back into a life where trust meant survival. The facility was built for it. Concrete corridors, reinforced doors, rooms stripped bare except for mats, weapons racks, and targets that could rise or vanish with a hiss of hydraulics. For the first week, no firearms, no explosives. Just movement, coordination. The kind of work that stripped away rust without you realizing it. They ran drills until muscle memory began to override hesitation. Moved through simulated compounds with nothing but their hands and instinct. Relearned the silent signals, the breaths between glances that spoke louder than words. And Sarah, Phantom, watched it all with an intensity that made Torres uneasy. She didn't just want them ready. She wanted them sharp enough to cut through the lies that had bound them for half a decade. "Slow it down," Sarah told Rodriguez during a clearing exercise. "Don't rush the corners. Your instinct's been rewired for civilian life. Speed will get you killed now." Rodriguez's jaw tightened, but she nodded. The truth was hard, but it was the truth. By week 2, the weapons came out. And the room changed. The first time Phantom put a round downrange, the sound cracked through the air like a verdict. Tight grouping. 800 yards. She could have carved her name into the target if she'd wanted. The others weren't far behind. Years away from a rifle hadn't dulled their edge as much as they'd feared. It was Vargas who said it first. "Feels like we're coming back to life." Sarah gave a small nod. "Ghosts don't stay dead." Torres kept her distance during training. She knew the eyes that followed her still carried blame. She let Sarah lead. Phantom had always been their axis, the one who could hold them together when everything else fell apart. But training wasn't the only thing happening. In those walls, Torres was digging, quietly, carefully. Files were being pulled from places even she had to sign for twice. Names cross-referenced, old intelligence reopened. The traitor who had sold out Unit 77 had never been caught. And if Torres was going to give them justice, she had to find him before they did. Sarah knew it too. She didn't say it outright, but her eyes told Torres every time they passed in the hallway. You find him, or we will. One night, after the others had gone to their quarters, Sarah stayed in the range alone. The overhead lights were dimmed, leaving the far end of the lane lost in shadow. She loaded a fresh magazine, sighted, and fired, each shot landing exactly where she meant it to. Torres stepped into the doorway. You planning on sleeping? Sarah didn't look back. I slept for 5 years, Admiral. Not anymore. Torres took a slow breath. We'll get there. But rushing it. Rushing? Sarah turned, her voice low but sharp. We've been buried alive. You can't rush digging your way out. Torres held her gaze. Then aim at the right target. Sarah's silence was her answer. By the end of the month, they moved like a unit again. Not perfect. Not whole, but dangerous. And somewhere beyond the fences of that facility, the man who had betrayed them was still out there. Still breathing for now. It started with a name. One name. Torres didn't say where it came from, and Sarah didn't ask. But when she slid the thin folder across the table, Sarah's eyes locked on the single page inside, like she was staring at a loaded weapon. The name was familiar. Too familiar. He was there, Sarah said quietly. Torres nodded. Not just there. He was the one feeding us the intel before nightfall. The one we trusted. Sarah's hands curled into fists. Captain William Keene. Naval Intelligence. Decorated. Trusted. And, if the documents were right, the architect of the trap that had nearly ended Unit 77. The proof was ugly. Encrypted communications routed through cutouts. Offshore accounts fattened at the exact moments classified information went missing. And the worst part? He was still in uniform. Still wearing the flag. He's protected, Torres said. Layers of people who owe him. You can't just walk in and... I'm not walking in, Sarah cut her off. I'm hunting. Torres had expected the fire in her voice. She'd felt it herself since the day the first report came in. But fire without control was a weapon that burned everything. Listen to me, Torres said. We do this wrong. It all comes down on you and your team. And he walks free. Sarah stared at her for a long beat. So we do it right. The next week's blurred. Training shifted from broad readiness to surgical precision. Keene's habits, his routines, his connections. The women learned everything. Vargas worked the comm side, intercepting signals, mapping patterns in the static. Chun handled movement, designing ingress and egress routes like brushstrokes on a canvas. Rodriguez leaned into her medic background, studying how to keep someone alive, or not. Sarah was the center of it all. The quiet, steady heartbeat of the hunt. At night, she would walk the perimeter of the facility alone. No rifle, no armor. Just the weight of the name echoing in her head. Keene. She could see him in her mind. The smug half-smile he'd worn during briefings. The way he'd shaken their hands before sending them to die. She'd spent years wondering if betrayal had a face. Now she knew. One evening, Torres called her into the secure office. We've got a window, Torres said. Keene's making a handoff in 3 weeks. Neutral ground. We can put eyes on him without raising alarms. Sarah leaned on the edge of the desk. Observation only? Torres' voice was firm. Observation only. We need him alive. We need what he knows. Sarah's lips curved, not into a smile but into something colder. Alive. For now. Torres caught it but let it pass. She'd learned something in these weeks. When it came to Sarah Martinez, threats didn't need volume. They lived. In the pauses, the night before the operation, Sarah stood in the team's quarters, looking around at the faces of the women she'd thought she'd lost forever. Tomorrow isn't payback, she said. Not yet. Tomorrow is proof. Proof that we're not ghosts anymore. Proof that the man who put us in the ground is still breathing, and that his time's running out. Rodriguez spoke up. And when that time runs out? Sarah met her gaze. We bury him. For real this time. They moved out before dawn. Silent convoy. Blacked out SUVs. The city swallowed them whole. Somewhere ahead, Keene was walking free, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. For the first time in 5 years, the women of Unit 77 were moving toward the man who had tried to erase them. And this time, they weren't walking into a trap. They were setting one. The air in the alley was damp, heavy with the smell of rain and exhaust. Sarah watched the man step from the black sedan like he owned the night. Captain William Keene. He looked older, softer around the edges, but the confidence was still there. The stride of a man who thought he was untouchable. From her vantage point, Sarah could see the briefcase in his hand. The exchange would happen here, in this unremarkable cut of city between warehouses. Neutral ground, Torres had said. But Sarah knew there was no such thing as neutral when you'd bled for the flag and been betrayed by it. Her earpiece crackled. Softly, Torres' voice. Phantom, hold position. This is surveillance only. Do not engage. Sarah didn't answer. She shifted slightly, adjusting the micro-camera lens hidden in her jacket. The rest of Unit 77 was spread across rooftops and shadows, eyes locked on Keene. Every angle covered. Every exit mapped out. They watched as he greeted a man in a charcoal suit. Watched the case change hands. A transaction like any other. Unless. You knew the language in their movements. The tell in Keene's smile that it wasn't evidence. Not yet, but it was a thread. And threads could be pulled until an empire unraveled. Rodriguez's voice came over comms. Target moving. Do we tail? Torres again. Negative. We've got what we need for today. Pull back. Regroup. Sarah stayed still. Her eyes followed Keene until he disappeared into the sedan. 1,000 images burned through her mind. Rodriguez zip tied in Raqqa. Chum beaten in the corner of a cell. William's screams when they came for her in the dark. 5 years of silence compressed into a single, shuddering breath. She stepped back from the ledge, vanishing into the alley shadow. 2 weeks later, Keene's name was everywhere in quiet. Circles that never touched the news. Federal investigators. Internal affairs. Words like treason whispered in corridors where even whispers were dangerous. He didn't see the walls closing in. Not yet, but Sarah did. And she knew walls were only the beginning. The reunion happened in the same steel-framed room where it had begun. 12 women. A circle. Torres was there, a file in her hands. Keene's under investigation. It'll stick. The people who protected him are starting to cut ties. He'll fall. Rodriguez leaned forward. And if it doesn't stick? Sarah's voice was quiet but carried through the room. Then we do what we've always done. We finish the job. There was no bravado in it, no anger in her tone. Just fact. Torres studied her for a moment. You're not the same woman I sent into Syria. Sarah met her gaze. None of us are. We're what you made us. And what they tried to destroy. Torres closed the file. You have your identities back, your records restored. Unit 77 is active again, under full oversight with every resource you need. The women exchanged glances. In their eyes was the unspoken truth. Resources mattered. Oversight mattered. But in the end, all they really had was each other. That night, Sarah stood alone on the roof of the facility, city lights faint in the distance. The wind carried the scent of rain again. Like the night she'd first seen Keene in the alley, she thought about the years stolen from them, about the lies told to keep them buried, about the faces of women who'd survived hell and still found the strength to come home. A quiet truth settled in her chest. Dignity didn't shout. It didn't announce itself, it acted. Unit 77 was whole again. And somewhere out there, a man who thought he'd gotten away with betrayal was beginning to feel the weight of footsteps he couldn't hear. The ghosts were moving, and ghosts don't rest.